My girlfriend said she was too young to be locked down and needed to explore her options. After 3 years together, I said explore away. 6 months later, she came crawling back ready to commit. I told her I don't need her anymore. Then she completely unraveled. All right, Reddit, strap in because this one's a full saga. My buddy Connor told me this story belonged here after watching the whole disaster unfold in real time. And honestly, after everything that happened, I think he's right. I'm Nate, 27 male, and I work in project management for a mid-size engineering firm out in Ohio. Nothing glamorous. I coordinate timelines for commercial builds, manage subcontractor schedules, make sure million-dollar projects don't fall apart because someone forgot to order rebar. It pays well and I'm good at it. Got my own apartment, a truck that's fully paid off, and student loans that are almost zeroed out. Basically the poster child for functional adult male, which, as you'll find out, was apparently both my greatest asset and my biggest crime. Paige and I met 3 years ago at my buddy Eli's game night. Eli throws these things every couple months at his place. Board games, card games, way too much competitive energy for a Wednesday evening. Half the fun is watching people lose their minds over Settlers of Catan, like there's actual money on the line. Paige showed up with a mutual friend, sat directly across from me, and proceeded to trash talk me for 2 straight hours while systematically stealing every resource I needed. Blocked my longest road, swiped the spot I was eyeing for a settlement, and did it all with this grin that made it impossible to be annoyed. I asked for her number before the game was even over. She was 22 at the time, wrapping up her last year of college with an education degree. Smart, funny, had this energy about her that made rooms feel different when she walked in. Not in a loud, attention-seeking way, more like she just naturally pulled people toward her. We started dating within 2 weeks of that game night, and honestly, things clicked faster than anything I'd experienced before. The first year was the kind of relationship you'd describe to your single friends just to watch them roll their eyes. We survived her finishing college, my company relocating me to a satellite office across town, and even a 6-month long-distance stretch when she landed a student teaching internship 2 states away. That LDR period alone would have killed most couples, especially ones that young. We made it work with alternating weekend visits and phone calls that went past midnight on weeknights. My phone bill was criminal, but it felt worth it. By year 2, we'd settled into this rhythm that felt like it had no expiration date. Sunday morning breakfast at this diner she loved where the pancakes were mediocre, but the coffee was somehow perfect. Thursday evening taco runs to this hole-in-the-wall spot that made carnitas so good, I'm convinced the owner sold his soul for the recipe. I knew her coffee order, her Netflix queue, which side of the bed she claimed, and exactly how many minutes to let her vent about her day before she wanted solutions, versus just someone to listen. Her family absorbed me like I'd always been there. Her dad, Robert, was this old-school civil engineer who'd spent 35 years building bridges and overpasses before retiring. We'd bond over project timelines and structural calculations at the dinner table, while everyone else glazed over. The man had stories about every overpass in the county, knew which ones he'd designed, and which ones had problems he could have fixed better. He showed me how to properly read a soil report, which sounds boring until you realize it's the difference between a building standing and a building becoming a very expensive pile of rubble. We'd spend Sunday afternoons watching football together, arguing about whether the Bengals would ever get their act together, and he'd tell me about engineering projects from the 80s, like they happened last week. Her mom, Patricia, treated me like the son she'd been waiting for, always sending me home with containers of leftovers stacked so high I needed both hands to carry them to my truck, texting me articles she thought I'd find interesting, asking my opinion on household stuff like I was already part of the family. She once called me directly to ask which paint color she should pick for the guest room, because she trusted my eye more than Robert's. I picked the sage green. It looked fantastic. They'd constantly tell Paige how lucky she was. Robert would make comments about locking this one down, and Patricia would not so subtly ask about future grandchildren timelines. I genuinely loved these people, and I thought the feeling was mutual all around. By year 3, we started making real plans, not someday plans, actual, concrete, putting money down plans. Found this apartment complex on the east side of the city with a 2-bedroom unit that had a small balcony and a designated parking spot for my truck. Good neighborhood, reasonable rent, close enough to both our jobs. I put down the deposit, $1,200 total, though I only lost $500 later since Paige hadn't technically signed anything yet. We were supposed to move in the following month. I was picturing furniture shopping and arguing about paint colors and figuring out whose dishes we'd keep and whose would go to Goodwill. The whole domestic starter pack. Had this mental image of our life clicking into the next gear? Move in together, save up, engagement within a year, wedding after that. A real, solid adult plan. What I didn't realize was that while I was building blueprints for our future, Paige was already sketching exit routes. I just couldn't see it yet. It happened on a Thursday, which was our sacred taco night. We were at our usual booth at the hole-in-the-wall spot, and I had my phone out showing her this furniture layout app I'd been messing with for the new apartment. I was deep into explaining why the couch absolutely had to face the window instead of the wall. Something about natural light and optimal TV angle positioning that I genuinely spent way too much time calculating when she put her fork down. Now, in the history of human relationships, nothing good has ever followed someone setting down their utensil mid-bite with that particular look on their face. It's the universal signal for the next 60 seconds of your life are about to be terrible. Nate, we need to talk. Stomach. Floor. Immediate. She started doing that thing where she twirls her hair around her finger, which she only did when she was nervous or about to say something she knew would detonate. She said she'd been thinking a lot lately, that she was only 25, that she'd only ever been with 3 guys her entire life, and I was one of them, that she felt like she was missing out on experiences, that she was too young to be tied down. I sat there for a second just processing the words, because my brain genuinely could not reconcile them with the woman sitting across from me. This was the same person who'd spent last weekend showing me cabinet hardware options for our new kitchen. The same person who'd cried happy tears when we got approved for the apartment. She kept going, said she could see the trajectory we were on, move-in, engagement, wedding, kids, the whole life roadmap, and she wanted to explore her options before locking herself into that path. See what else was out there before committing. Let me translate that into plain English for the audience. My girlfriend of 3 years, exactly 3 weeks after I put down a deposit on our apartment, was dumping me so she could go date other guys. But she called it exploring options, because that sounds more like a personal growth journey and less like what it actually was. Then came the part that still makes my jaw clench when I think about it. She reached across the table for my hand. I pulled it back and said we could totally stay friends through all this. That maybe after she'd had her experiences, we could reconnect down the road and pick up where we left off. And then the quote, the one that'll be etched into my brain until I'm 90 years old and can't remember my own name, but somehow still remember this. You're definitely husband material, Nate. Just not yet. Husband material. Just not yet. Like I was a really nice winter coat. She was hanging in the back of the closet until the weather changed. I told her very slowly and very clearly that if she walked away from this, it was permanent. Not a break. Not a pause. Not a, let's revisit this in 6 months. Done. Over. Finished. She laughed. She actually laughed like I'd just told a joke at a dinner party. Said I was being dramatic. That people take breaks all the time and it's totally normal. I told her this wasn't a break. She was ending a 3-year relationship to go date around, and we both knew it. She sighed like I was being difficult, then delivered the knockout punch. I know you're upset, but you'll understand eventually. We're meant to be together, Nate. I just need to get this out of my system first. Get it out of her system, like I was the boring vegetable she had to eat before she could get to dessert. I stood up, put cash on the table for my half, looked at her one last time and said, explore away, Paige. Hope you find what you're looking for. Then I walked out of that restaurant while she sat there with her mouth hanging open and her carnitas going cold. Went home and called the landlord immediately. Lost the $500 from the deposit since Paige hadn't co-signed anything. But honestly, best $500 I ever spent. Blocked her on everything that same night. Phone, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, the works. Not out of spite, and not dramatically, just decisively. She wanted to go explore? She could do it without me watching from the cheap seats. I'm not going to sit here and pretend the first few weeks were some triumphant montage of self-improvement and zero feelings. 3 years is a long time to share your life with someone, and your brain doesn't just flip a switch because your pride made a decision your heart hasn't fully endorsed yet. I'd reach for my phone to text her something I saw that was funny, then remember. I'd pass by the taco place on my way home and feel this hollow thud in my chest. The apartment felt weirdly quiet without her random evening phone calls about whatever drama unfolded at her school that day. But here's what I know about pain. It's temporary if you refuse to feed it. And I flat out refused. Started channeling every ounce of that emotional energy into things that would actually pay dividends. Joined a rec league basketball team that played Tuesday and Thursday nights. My company was offering a professional development certification program for project lead, so I enrolled in that too. Between full-time work, basketball twice a week, and studying for the certification on weekends, I barely had time to eat dinner, let alone sit around replaying conversations in my head. The work stuff took off faster than I expected. My manager had been hinting at a promotion for a while, and about 6 weeks after the breakup, he pulled me aside and said he was putting me on the shortlist for team lead. Said my output had jumped noticeably, and he wanted to fast-track me once I finished the certification. Turns out, when you're not allocating mental bandwidth to planning date nights, analyzing text message tones, and navigating the emotional landscape of another person's mood swing, you can actually pour that focus into your career. Revolutionary concept. Upgraded a few things in my life that had been on hold. Bought a new couch that was entirely my taste. Dark leather, oversized, zero decorative pillows. Set up a proper home office with dual monitors. Started cooking real meals instead of the compromised restaurant choices couples always end up making, where nobody's thrilled but nobody's technically disappointed either. I could eat steak 3 nights in a row if I wanted, and nobody was going to suggest we try that new Mediterranean place instead. Rec League basketball turned out to be exactly what I needed. Mix of guys from different backgrounds, couple of teachers, an accountant, a firefighter, this quiet electrician named Dale who barely talked off the court but turned into an absolute animal during games. We'd run full court for 2 hours, grab food after, talk about nothing important. No relationship analysis, no emotional debriefing. Just dudes being dudes. The kind of friendships where you don't have to explain yourself or justify your feelings. You just show up, compete, eat, and go home feeling better than when you arrived. Dale became a regular hangout buddy outside of basketball, too. Guy had this workshop in his garage where he restored old radios and turntables. Started spending some Saturday mornings over there, helping him strip old cabinets and rewire vintage equipment. Working with your hands when your brain won't stop churning is better than any coping mechanism anyone's ever invented. The certification program was no joke either. 3 months of coursework and a final exam that had a 30% pass rate. But I attacked it like it personally owed me money. Studied every weekend, formed a study group with a few people from the program, and ended up passing on the first attempt. Got bumped to team lead the same week the results came in, with a salary increase in my own office that actually had a window. My manager said I'd earned it twice over. 2 months of total radio silence from Paige. Nothing. No calls, no texts, no carrier pigeons. I honestly started thinking that was it. Clean break, clean ending, everybody goes their separate way. She got what she asked for. I was building something better. Life moves on. I genuinely could not have been more wrong about what was coming. The reconnaissance mission started exactly 2 months in, like she'd set a calendar reminder. First wave was Brooke, Paige's best friend, texting me from an unknown number. Hey Nate, it's Brooke. Can we talk? Paige is really struggling. Deleted it without responding. I wasn't Paige's emotional support system anymore. She'd voluntarily deactivated that service. Then her sister Dana tracked me down on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, the professional networking platform, sent me this corporate-style message that started with hoping my career was going well, then casually pivoted to asking if I'd be at Eli's upcoming birthday party. Dropped in that Paige had mentioned we were taking some space, but she really missed me. Taking some space, like I'd gone on a business trip and would be returning to my regularly scheduled relationship shortly. Didn't respond. Then came the accidental encounters, which were about as accidental as a premeditated ambush. Suddenly, Paige was at my coffee shop on a Tuesday morning, at my grocery store on a Saturday. At the bookstore, I hit up every single weekend without fail. Each time she'd do this exaggerated surprise face, like she was in a community theater production of Coincidence, the musical. Oh, Nate! What are the odds? By the third random encounter, I just looked at her and said the odds were extremely high considering she had my entire weekly routine memorized. She tried to look offended, claimed she shopped at that particular store all the time now. I reminded her she once told me, in her own words, that their produce section smelled like a compost bin having a bad day. She huffed and said, "People change." "Exactly," I said, and steered my cart towards self-checkout without looking back. Meanwhile, through mutual friends who apparently thought I needed to stay updated, I got the highlight reel of Paige's exploration phase. Different guy rotating through her Instagram stories every couple of weeks, out partying every weekend, a Vegas trip with some random dude she'd matched with on a dating app, group photos where she's front and center with guys I'd never seen before, captioned with stuff like living with no regrets and this is what freedom feels like, living her absolute best life, apparently. And honestly, good for her. Genuinely, she wanted to explore, she was exploring. That's called following through on your own decision. Nothing but respect for the commitment to the bit. Connor was the one who kept me most informed, even though I told him multiple times I didn't need updates. He'd send me screenshots with no context, just a LOL or a bro. One time he sent me a photo of Paige at some rooftop event with a guy who looked like he sold cryptocurrency as a personality trait, captioned "New connections, new energy." Connor's response to me, "The new energy looks like it skipped leg day." I'll give the man credit. His commentary was consistently elite, even when I wished he'd just stop sending me this stuff entirely. The thing is, while she was out there cataloging her options, I wasn't sitting in my apartment staring at old photos. The basketball league had me in the best shape I'd been in since college. The certification program was opening up project opportunities I wouldn't have had access to before. I was building friendships that existed on their own merit, not because of couple dynamics or social obligations. My entire life wasn't just surviving without Paige. It was actively, measurably, undeniably better. 3 months turned into 4, then 5. I figured the flying monkeys had circled back to headquarters with a full report confirming the target had moved on, and everybody would finally let it go. Not even close. 5 months after the taco place conversation, I came home from basketball practice and found Paige sitting on the floor outside my apartment door. No makeup, hair pulled back, wearing an old college hoodie of mine she'd apparently kept. She looked like a completely different human from the party girl version on Instagram, and she knew exactly what she was doing with that visual. She said we needed to talk. I said we absolutely did not, and started unlocking my door. She scrambled to her feet and begged for 5 minutes. I told her she'd had 3 years and traded them for 5 months of exploring, so how was that working out? Tears started immediately. She said she'd made a mistake, a huge one, that she'd explored, she'd dated, she'd done the whole thing. And what she'd learned from all of it was that I was the one she wanted. She was ready to commit now. For real this time. I actually laughed out loud. She was ready now. After running through every available option on the menu and finding nothing better. How incredibly flattering. She said that wasn't fair. I told her what wasn't fair was being told I was husband material on layaway and expected to maintain my shelf life while she comparison shopped. She went quiet for a second, then said the thing that told me everything. I thought you would wait. We had 3 years together, Nate. Had? Past tense. She used past tense without even catching it. 3 years together. And her entire operating assumption was that I'd just sit there like a loyal retriever at the front door, tail wagging, ready to welcome her home whenever the adventure got boring. The entitlement was actually breathtaking in its scope. I told her I was seeing someone. That was a lie. I wasn't at the time. But watching the confidence drain from her face in real time was worth the minor dishonesty. She spiraled instantly. Who? For how long? When did this happen? I told her it didn't matter, that I'd moved on. Just like she'd wanted. She fired back that she hadn't wanted me to move on. She'd wanted me to be there when she got back. And there it was. The truth. No wrapping paper, no bow. She'd never intended to actually let me go. She just expected me to stay in standby mode while she went on her little adventure. I told her to go home. She sat back down on the floor and said she'd wait as long as it took. So I called building security and asked them to escort a trespasser from the hallway. They walked her out while she shouted about true love and second chances. Real dignified scene for an 8 p.m. Tuesday. That should have been the finale. It was the opening act. Next day, Paige showed up at my office. Told the receptionist she was my girlfriend and needed to drop off my medication. Security called me down to the lobby, and there she was, holding a bag from the sandwich shop we used to go to together, smiling like nothing was wrong. Called me babe in front of the entire reception area. I told security she was my ex-girlfriend and asked them to escort her out. She protested the whole way while my coworkers did their best impression of people who weren't watching. My manager pulled me aside afterward. I explained the situation. Ex-girlfriend, struggling with the concept of ex. He was understanding about it. Said it wouldn't be a problem going forward. Spoiler, it became a problem going forward. Different strategy this time. Flowers showed up at my office 2 days later. Enormous arrangement that probably cost a couple hundred. Card read, "To my soulmate, always yours, Paige." I carried them straight to the break room and told the admin staff to enjoy them. They were gone in 30 minutes. Then came the digital warfare. Since I'd blocked her on everything, she created brand new accounts. Started commenting on my social media posts from 2 years ago. Inside jokes, heart emojis, remember this day? Type stuff. Tagged me and shared memories through mutual friends' profiles. Posted this massive open letter on her Instagram about losing the love of her life because of stubbornness and pride. My absolute favorite line from that manifesto. He says he's moved on, but I know he still loves me. True love doesn't just disappear. Connor sent me screenshots with a simple, bro. I told him, and every other mutual friend, the same thing. Don't engage, don't respond, don't relay messages, don't give her a single thread to pull on. Then, she went for the nuclear option. She called my mother. My mother. Mom phoned me, confused, saying Paige had called her crying about how I wouldn't forgive her for some silly fight. I sat Mom down and told her the full story. The taco place breakup, the husband material but not yet line, the exploration tour, the showing up at my apartment, the office stunt. Mom was quiet for about 10 seconds. Then, So she dumped you to go run around town and now expects you to take her back? No, absolutely not. I like that girl, but absolutely not. Don't worry, I'll handle this. I have no idea what my mother said to Paige, but whatever it was, it triggered a chain reaction. Paige's mom called me the very next day screaming, how dare I turn my mother against her daughter? How Paige made one mistake. How I was destroying her life and her reputation. I told Mrs. Crawford, as calmly as I could manage, that her daughter made a choice, and I'd made mine. Asked her politely to not contact me again. She said I'd regret this, that Paige was the best thing that ever happened to me. So I asked the obvious follow-up. If she was such a prize, why did she leave? Silence. Then she called me a cold, heartless man. I told her I was a man who understood his own value and said goodbye. The voicemails multiplied after that. Different phone numbers, borrowed phones, each message a little more unhinged than the last. She knew I was home because she could see my light on from outside. She wanted to know if the girl from my basketball team was my new girlfriend. She said she'd wait forever if that's what it took. One voicemail was just 45 seconds of crying, followed by, "You know we belong together, Nate," and a hang-up. Another one was weirdly calm, almost businesslike, where she laid out a 5-point plan for how we could rebuild trust, like she was pitching a project proposal. The range was genuinely impressive in the worst possible way. She also started showing up at places adjacent to my routine. Not my coffee shop directly anymore, she'd learned that lesson, but the parking lot across the street. Not outside my apartment building, but parked down the block where she thought I wouldn't notice. Like she'd read an article about restraining order boundaries and was trying to find the exact line she could toe without crossing. Except there was no restraining order yet, and she was still very much crossing every reasonable boundary a person could cross. I filed a police report for harassment. The officer was sympathetic but realistic. Unless she physically threatened me, it was technically a civil matter. Suggested I pursue a restraining order. My buddy Gavin, who's a lawyer, looked into it and said I needed more documentation. Every text, every voicemail, every unexpected appearance, log it all. Build the file until it's undeniable. So that's exactly what I did. Became the most organized stalking victim in the state of Ohio. Every incident time-stamped, cataloged, and filed. Project management skills coming in clutch for reasons I never anticipated. 6 months after the original breakup, things went nuclear. I was on a date, my first real one since Paige, with a girl named Ren from the certification program. She was an environmental engineer who could explain watershed drainage systems and make it actually interesting. Had this bone-dry sense of humor that snuck up on you, and, critically, treated me like someone she was excited to be around, not someone she was keeping in her back pocket. We were at this Italian place downtown, sharing appetizers and having a conversation that flowed so naturally, it was almost suspicious. After 3 years of walking on eggshells I didn't even realize were there. Talking to someone who was simply present and engaged felt like stepping into sunlight after a long winter. About 45 minutes in, Ren's expression shifted. She leaned across the table and said quietly that there was a woman sitting alone near the front of the restaurant who'd been staring at us for a while. Not casually glancing over. Staring, like she was trying to set something on fire with her eyes. I turned around, and there was Paige, wearing the red dress I'd bought her for our second anniversary, which was a choice that said everything about her mental state. She gave me this little wave like we were old friends bumping into each other at the grocery store, then stood up and started walking toward our table. Nate, what a coincidence. I told her she needed to leave, immediately. She completely ignored me, looked at Ren, and introduced herself as my girlfriend, then corrected herself. Ex. But not for long. Smiled like a shark that just spotted a swimmer. Ren started to stand up. I reached over, touched her hand, and asked her to stay. Turned to Paige and told her she was embarrassing herself. She tilted her head and asked if she was the one who was embarrassing herself, or if I was embarrassing myself with this obvious rebound. Then Ren did something that caught everybody off guard. She sat back down, looked Paige directly in the face, and said in this calm, even voice that whatever Paige had with me, she threw it away. That following someone to restaurants wasn't romantic. It was pathetic. Paige's whole demeanor cracked. Told Ren she didn't know anything about our relationship. Ren said she knew I'd blocked Paige, knew she'd been harassing me, and knew Paige was about 3 seconds from being escorted out if she didn't leave on her own. I pulled out my phone and said I was calling the police. Paige lunged for it, tried to snatch it out of my hand, and in the process knocked Ren's glass of water all over her white blouse, soaked her completely. The entire restaurant went quiet. The manager materialized like he'd been watching on a security camera, which he probably had, and told Paige firmly that she needed to leave. She refused, said I was her boyfriend. I corrected him. She was my ex. She was stalking me and I needed him to call the police. He nodded to a waiter who already had his phone out. That's when the math finally clicked for Paige. Her eyes darted around the restaurant at every single face turned in our direction, and you could see the realization hit her like a cold shower. She started backpedaling, begging, telling me not to do this, please. I told her she did this. Every single choice, every escalation, every boundary she bulldozed through. She did all of it. Every step from the taco place to this moment was her own doing. Police showed up about 10 minutes later. 2 officers took statements from me, Ren, the manager, and a couple of nearby diners who'd had front row seats to the entire production. Paige tried to frame it as a misunderstanding between 2 people who used to be in love, but Ren's soaked blouse kind of undermined the harmless little chat narrative. They didn't arrest her, but they issued a criminal trespass warning for the restaurant and strongly recommended she stop contacting me entirely. As they escorted her out, she turned and yelled across the entire restaurant that this wasn't over, that we were meant to be together. Every head in the place swiveled like they were watching a live soap opera. Dinner and a show, folks. No extra charge. Ren handled the whole thing with more composure than I probably deserved on a first date. Actually cracked a joke about it being the most memorable Tuesday evening she'd ever had. The restaurant comped our meal, probably out of pity and secondhand embarrassment, and we ended up grabbing pizza down the street since the vibe at the Italian place was fairly torched. She kissed me goodnight at her car and said to give her a call when I got the restraining order sorted out. I knew right then. Keep her. Filed for an emergency protective order first thing the next morning. Court date set for the following week. Court day arrived on a Wednesday morning. I showed up with Gavin and a folder thick enough to double as a doorstop. Every single text message documented and printed. Every voicemail transcribed word for word. Witness statements from the restaurant incident. The police report. Building security logs from my apartment. The LinkedIn messages from her sister. Screenshots of the fake social media accounts. The flower delivery receipt. All of it. Organized chronologically with tabs and labels. Because if there's one thing a project manager knows how to do, it's compile documentation. Paige showed up with her mom and a lawyer who looked like he'd been pulled from the bottom of a search results page. She was dressed like she was heading to Sunday morning service. Conservative navy dress, minimal makeup, hair pinned back in a neat bun. The transformation from party girl to choir girl was genuinely impressive from a costume design standpoint, even if nobody in that courtroom was buying it. The judge took her time reviewing the evidence. Page after page, voicemail after voicemail. Methodical, thorough. The kind of review that makes a guilty person's hands start shaking, which pages absolutely were. Her lawyer made his pitch, called it a misunderstanding between 2 former partners, said his client simply wanted closure and had been trying to apologize for ending the relationship too hastily. The judge looked at him over the rim of her glasses and asked if he'd actually reviewed the full evidence packet, specifically the voicemail where his client stated she could see my apartment light on from outside, implying she was surveilling the building. Even the lawyer looked like he wanted to be somewhere else. Then Paige asked to address the court directly. Against her lawyer's advice, which in my experience is never a good sign for anyone, she stood up and gave this rehearsed-sounding speech about how we'd had 3 beautiful years together, and she'd made one mistake. That she'd simply asked for space to grow as a person, and now I was punishing her for it. The judge wasn't moved, confirmed that Paige had ended the relationship voluntarily, in her own words, to explore options. Paige acknowledged that but tried to qualify it. The judge cut her off, asked if I had told Paige at the time of the breakup that it would be permanent. Paige said I'd been upset and didn't really mean it. The judge flipped through another page, told Paige she was 25 years old, more than old enough to understand that decisions have consequences, that she'd ended a relationship. The other party had accepted that ending and moved on with his life, and her refusal to accept his decision had escalated into stalking, harassment, workplace disruption, and an altercation at a restaurant. Paige protested the altercation part, said she hadn't assaulted anyone, just knocked over a glass accidentally. The judge reminded her that the glass got knocked over while she was attempting to grab my phone after she had followed me to a restaurant where I was on a date, which wasn't an accident. It was the predictable result of a pattern of escalating behavior. Paige broke down crying, said through tears that she just wanted me back, and asked if wanting someone back was really a crime. The judge paused for exactly 1 beat, then said yes. The stalking and harassment components were, in fact, crimes. Restraining order. Granted. 2 full years. 0 contact of any kind. Maintain a distance of 500 feet at all times. No communication through third parties. No social media contact. The whole package. Walking out of the courthouse felt like stepping out of a building I'd been locked in for months. That particular weight I'd been carrying since the first voicemail, that low-grade anxiety of not knowing when she'd pop up next, just evaporated. Didn't get far before Mrs. Crawford intercepted me in the parking lot. Asked if I was happy now. said I'd humiliated Paige and destroyed her reputation. I told her, as evenly as I could, that Paige had done this entirely to herself. She fired back that Paige loved me. I corrected her. Paige loved the idea of having me stored as a backup plan. Those are two fundamentally different things. She told me I'd die alone with my attitude. Gavin stepped in before I could respond. Informed Mrs. Crawford that any further contact from her or any family member would constitute a violation of the protective order by proxy and would be treated accordingly. Advised her strongly to walk away. She did, but not before lobbing one last shot over her shoulder. She was too good for you anyway. Right. That's why she was tracking my apartment lights and ambushing me at Italian restaurants on a Tuesday evening. Clearly the behavior of someone out of my league. The aftermath was swift and brutal, and every bit of it was self-inflicted on her end. Paige lost her job within 3 weeks of the court date. From what I heard through mutual friends, she'd been calling in sick multiple days a week for over a month. Her boss finally pulled her in and let her go after she no-showed on a Monday without calling. Hard to maintain steady employment when your full-time hobby is surveillance operations on your ex-boyfriend. Her Instagram did a complete 180 overnight. Deleted every single party photo, every dating app highlight reel, every living my best life post. Replaced them with motivational quotes about surviving narcissistic abuse and rising from the ashes. Posted a long caption about how some people can't handle a strong woman who knows what she wants. Connor screenshotted it and sent it to me with zero commentary. Didn't need any. She moved back in with her parents by the end of that month. Eli told me Robert had basically stopped talking to her about the whole thing entirely. Patricia was still defending Paige publicly, but behind closed doors, the Crawford house was apparently a war zone. Robert reportedly told Paige at the dinner table that she'd thrown away the best thing that ever walked through their front door, and Patricia told him to stop. They argued about it for a week straight. Dana, the sister who'd LinkedIn stalked me earlier, apparently sided with Robert, which only made things worse. I felt bad for Robert. Good man caught in the crossfire of his daughter's choices. Brooke made one final play about a month after the restraining order. Showed up at Eli's place during a weekend hangout knowing I'd be there. Pulled me aside on the back porch and said, Paige understood she'd messed up, that she was getting help, that maybe in a year or two I could reconsider. I told Brooke no, not in a year, not in 5. Told her to pass along that I hoped Paige figured things out for her own sake, but that door was welded shut. Brooke called me cold. I told her to have a good night and went back inside to finish my basketball game on TV. That was 3 months ago. Haven't heard a word since. The restraining order is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Meanwhile, my life kept building. Got assigned to lead a major commercial project at work, biggest one the firm had taken on that year. My boss told me I was the only person on the team he trusted to keep it on schedule. Spent the first month just assembling the timeline and coordinating subcontractors, and it felt good to sink my teeth into something that actually rewarded planning and attention to detail instead of punishing it. Dale from basketball helped me rebuild the suspension on my truck over a couple of weekends. Guy barely said 10 words the whole time, but he knew his way around a lift kit better than anyone I'd met. We'd work for 4 hours straight, grab food, and that was the whole social interaction. Perfect. Ren and I are still together. She met my parents last month. Mom made pot roast. Dad grilled Ren about her engineering degree for an hour like he was conducting a job interview. And by the end of dinner, they were trading stories about the worst bosses they'd ever worked for and laughing so hard Mom had to tell them to keep it down. Dad even pulled out old photo albums from the garage to show Ren my awkward middle school phase, which I could have done without. Mom pulled me into the kitchen while Ren and Dad were still talking and just squeezed my arm. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. On the drive home, Ren said my dad was hilarious and that my mom's pot roast was the best thing she'd eaten in a year. Simple stuff. The kind of simple that actually matters. 2 weeks ago, Ren and I drove out to Hocking Hills for a weekend trip. Hiked the Gorge Trail, found this overlook where you could see the whole valley, sat there for probably an hour just talking about nothing. On the drive back, she reached over and held my hand without saying a word. No big speech, no dramatic moment, just two people who wanted to be exactly where they were with exactly who they were with. Last week, Connor forwarded me one final screenshot. Paige had posted a new Instagram story, a photo of a journal and a cup of coffee, captioned, "Day 1 of my new chapter." Connor's message underneath, "How many chapters is this girl on now? She's writing a whole trilogy." I laughed, put my phone down, and went back to the project timeline I was building. Had a deadline coming up and subcontractors to wrangle. Some people spend their lives writing chapters. Other people just live. Best $500 deposit I ever lost. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.